Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you on behalf of APAC News Network. Today, our guest is Arun Rangaraju from Salesforce, and he will be talking on a host of digital HQ headquarters and the implementation of artificial intelligence and how it is being leveraged and how Salesforce is helping enterprises in a digital first environment. Before we start, a very brief introduction on APAC. APAC News Network is a media organization headquartered out of Noida with a pan India presence and outside India presence in Singapore, Malaysia, and Dubai. And our focus is primarily on technology deployment across focus verticals like government, healthcare, education, BFSI, the startup community, the SMEs, and obviously enterprise IT. So maybe the first, Arun would like to start with if you can take us through. I think in 2021, after the Slack acquisition, the concept of digital headquarters that came. So, if you can briefly take our viewers through the concept of digital HQ and more importantly, how it is being deployed in the Indian scenario. Arun.
Great. Thank you, Rajneesh, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. Um, before I get into details of Slack, I wanted to talk a little bit about what digital HQ means, and why has it become so mainstream now? And the reason is really the way people have been working for the last 18 to 24 months because of the pandemic, working remotely. And our co-CEO, Brett Taylor, actually summarized it the best in just 3 words by saying geography is history. So, it's no longer relevant where you're working. And work is not really a place that you go to anymore. It is just about what you need to do. And you can accomplish it from anywhere. Salesforce has a lot of experience with this because in the last 18 months we have hired about 30,000 people globally, who have all joined during the pandemic, joined remotely. I myself joined at the peak of wave one. So I know what it looks like, and it took me 6 months before I actually met any colleague physically. So the whole concept of the digital HQ is the way business will function, the way people will work is not by going to a large physical infrastructure, which is the headquarters or head office or sales office, or call it what you will. But it's really about enabling uh, technology infrastructure which enables employees to collaborate amongst each other, collaborate with their partners, collaborate with their customers. And that is really what we mean by the digital HQ. And underpinning the creation of a digital HQ is, a strong workplace collaboration tool. And that is really where Slack came in and why it's so important.
Okay. Maybe the best way to see, obviously, as you mentioned, the situation during the pandemic and the work from anywhere kind of environment necessitated the advent of the concept of digital HQ. But what that meant during the pandemic was the pattern of workload also got changed, and a lot of heterogeneous devices and heterogeneous networks also came into the system. So,
Correct.
keeping those in mind, how were the dynamics of the digital HQ that you are talking about? And if you can take us maybe a couple of use cases in the Indian context.
Sure, and maybe I can use Salesforce's own example to tell you what we are doing. So now the things are a lot better. All companies are looking at getting employees back to work, but we know that it will never be back to work physically full time. So it will be either hybrid, or it will be still fully remote for certain types of employees, or maybe for a few roles it's back to in person working. And I think that is fine. And we've seen ourselves that during the pandemic, with the remote way of working, productivity actually went up by 13 to 15% for Salesforce itself, and we reported fantastic growth over the last 5 quarters. I think what is needed is, employees should not feel at a disadvantage based on the location from which they're working. So whether they are working from home, or from an office, or from a customer's office, they need access to the same information, they need access to the same data that is needed to make them effective in their day job, right? And that is what collaboration tools such as Slack enable, because they act like your single window into everything that you need to do to accomplish your work. So you may want to connect to an HR system to book your leave. You may want to look into uh, a CRM system to look at your pipeline, and if you're in the sales job. But at the same time, you also need to stay connected with your team. And really, an advanced workplace collaboration tool allows you to do all that, provides a window into all the applications and the data that you need to do your job, and still stay connected with your team, with your customers, whether they are physically with you or remotely. uh, I think the other thing that is important is, processes also need to evolve with this. So at no point should an employee feel that he or she is getting an advantage by working remotely, or coming to the office, which means transparency, communication to everyone becomes even more important. And I think that is what all companies need to embrace. uh, and that's just going to be the new way of working. And I've seen, for example, even customer meetings. Even customers are now preferring a lot of the meetings to be virtual, right? And what they're saying is, if you're coming to me with some transactional stuff, it is something that we can finish off quickly on a virtual meeting. We don't need to actually travel and meet each other physically. So physical meetings then are spent in probably more strategic conversations. And that is really also allowing productivity across both our own organization as well as our customers. And I think I see that happening with Indian customers as well. They've got so used to this virtual way of working. Doing meetings is faster. You don't spend the 2 hours commuting. You get a lot more work done in a day, and a lot of the transactional stuff can actually be finished off in online meetings, leaving space for the more strategic and the thinking stuff for other for the physical meetings.
Okay, so while obviously some of the things which you said towards the end, those are definite advantages of a virtual mode of working. I'll come to a point earlier you mentioned when there was a need for a process so that all the components work seamlessly in this virtual mode of working. Now, again, let's stick to the Indian context. In the Indian context, there are a lot of other issues involved, which, okay, in some cases, there was some sort of compromise made during the pandemic. But what I'm talking about is infrastructure across the country is definitely not uniform. The
Correct.
quality of connectivity, the quality of power infrastructure again is not in. When we are talking about a hybrid or a predominantly in person and some with virtual mode of working, how can you basically ultimately devise or design such a policy when because that would require some sort of standardization. So how do you manage that?
I think it's a great question. If you really look at the social changes that happened during the pandemic, a lot of the employees who were working in the bigger cities actually went back to their hometowns, right? They gave up their homes, went back to their hometowns. Obviously, financially, it was beneficial. You know, you don't need to pay the huge rents in the big cities, and you have the comfort of home still. Um, Now, when we are looking at people returning to work, it's very difficult to frame one single policy that fits everyone. And I think what organizations need to look for, and what we are implementing within Salesforce, is something called a flexible teaming agreement. So which means every team that works, they are given the freedom to kind of draft what is their teaming agreement, what is their way of working. So how often will we meet in person, how often, and for what kind of work do we need to meet in person. If it needs to be hybrid, then how many days a week do we actually come into the office? Or there are certain roles which need very strong connectivity, and as you said, in India a lot of places you struggle with infrastructure. So for those roles, we are saying it's probably better for you to come back into the office, where at least you avoid all the challenges with infrastructure, and you use the office infrastructure to do your work. So the flexible teaming agreement is key to the way we are returning to work. And we are also enabling that with other aspects of health and safety, because there are still concerns in people's mind. If I go back to office and there's a large crowd, how do I stay safe while I'm doing my job? And there, we have certain solutions which allow employees to return safely. So we have a product called Work.com, through which employees can actually book shifts when they want to come into the office. There is a certain protocol that is then followed with regard to showing their vaccine certificate or getting them tested when they actually come into the office. And through that, we are also able to monitor the health and safety aspects and give employees the comfort that even if you come in, we are not compromising on any of the other health aspects that you would worry about. So I would say that there is no one policy you can implement. And I find the flexible teaming agreement working quite well, because for certain sales roles, it's probably okay to be remote or hybrid, but for certain more administrative roles or finance roles or whatever, it may be just better to come into the office. And all employees have been given a choice. So given their personal circumstances, if they want to choose one over the other, all they need to do is discuss it with their team and their manager, and that's how they get back to work. And we enable it with products like Work.com, that have been deployed internally. There is one more aspect I do want to highlight. Employees have got so used to working remotely, that there's almost a reluctance to come into the office and have any kind of social interaction. And I think that is something that companies need to keep an eye on, because a certain level of social interaction is needed to build a rapport with your team and your colleagues. And if you just continue being 100% remote, there is a risk to the overall culture of the company. And hence it is important to plan certain meetings face to face, certain get-togethers, events. Of course, do it in a safe manner, and that is important. I can again give an example. As I said, 30,000 employees of Salesforce joined during the pandemic, right? Many of them had never been to an office. When we did our kickoff for this year, our global company kickoff, we actually got together 5,000 employees in New York City in a single physical location. Now think of that. For people who have not been used to seeing even two people outside their family for 18 months, to suddenly be in a room with 5,000 people is initially a scary aspect. And I think that is where technology comes to the rescue. uh, so we had daily testing that was carried out. It was done using a kit that you could administer yourself. Every morning before going to the meeting, you upload the test results to the healthcare provider's cloud, And from there, it would come into Salesforce's own product called Safety Cloud, which we have announced recently for companies to open up safely. Uh, and only if the result is negative, the Safety Cloud would then generate a daily pass to allow entry into the venue. So there was a whole lot of rigorous testing and monitoring behind the scenes to ensure that everyone felt safe about coming together. And I am a proof that this was done spectacularly well. We had 5,000 people meeting for over 3 days, and as far as I know, none of my colleagues got infected or had any other kind of health issues because of that. So while we encourage hybrid working and remote working, that is here to stay. I think there is a certain amount of investment that companies need to make to ensure in-person interactions, and that can be backed up by technology such as Work.com and the Safety Cloud.
Okay, so when you are talking about these specific technologies like work.com, what I would like to say to support this concept and this whole concept of digital HQ, what are currently the solutions and services that are in the Salesforce portfolio which supports this concept?
So as I said, these are our clouds that we have released recently, right? So the Work.com basically allows you to set up different shifts in each of your office locations, right? So if an employee decides to come into office on some day, he or she can then choose which office I want to go to and for what time period, and there is a shift that is booked, right? And taking into consideration uh, social distancing and other health requirements, we may decide that while an office capacity is, let's say, 100 seats, we may want to allow only 25 people to come into office on that particular day. So through that shift booking, you also control how many people are actually coming into office, right? And there is a pre-screening that is done for all of them in terms of uploading their vaccination certificate, so that all of them are doubly vaccinated. And then you can decide based on your organization policy whether you still want to do additional testing on the day that they come, or the vaccine certificate is good enough. And through this you are able to monitor who's coming in, who's going out, and if there is any such issue, then you can at least track who else could be impacted. So the Work.com is clearly targeted at just allowing offices to open safely. The Safety Cloud, as I explained through our example of our company kickoff, that is really meant for large scale events. So whether they are employee events or consumer events or customer events where a large number of people are coming together, that is really about providing integration to uh, testing solutions and any other safety aspects that you may want to implement at the event. So these are all live. They are generally available to our customers to use, and we do have many customers which are um either using them or actively evaluating them.
So, specifically, if you can give example instances where organizations in Indian scenario are
Mhm.
using this, and other than the Salesforce example that you gave, and what have been some of the challenges that they have been facing here, and how are you mitigating those challenges?
So Safety Cloud is very very new. I mean, we launched it just about a month ago. So I cannot talk of uh, customers in India using the Safety Cloud. But Work.com is, as I said, being used by companies to monitor physical entry into offices. We have also used variations of our Safety Cloud and the Work.com to actually aid vaccination rollouts, for example. So we've done a lot of work with the Azim Premji Foundation, where we actually had, because they were actually rolling out vaccinations in about 10 states of India, covering about 7 crore people, and they had to get a vaccine platform up and running in like 4 to 6 weeks to enable tracking and monitoring of the vaccine. So with the Azim Premji Foundation, we've actually built a customized app called Vax IT, which they actually use to roll out vaccine programs. But for corporates, it's really using the work.com to enable entry into offices and just ensuring safety at the physical workplace. And this doesn't really need any big investment. Work.com is like all our products. It's a cloud enabled solution, and there is an app that works on the mobile phone through which you book your shifts, and then you go into the office.
Now the
but
question
but
was,
slack but Slack is the other mainstream application which is not related to safety or this. But Slack is a very widely used workplace collaboration tool. It initially gained a lot of popularity in uh, you know large technical teams. So technical teams that need to collaborate when they are building a new software product, for example, uh, were actively using Slack, and many of them were our customers even before Salesforce actually acquired Slack. So that's been a big part of it. What we are seeing now is the use of Slack as an enabler of workplace collaboration. So you may have 10 other systems working in the background which you need for your day's work, but how do you convert everything into a Slack first approach? How does Slack become your primary window into everything that you need to do to accomplish your work, right? So how do you log into multiple other applications, as I said, an HR application or the sales application? You can do that through Slack. So Slack has connectors to all these applications that you can build. You can use Slack for messaging and chat and collaboration within your group, right? We've also activated added new features recently, called Slack Huddle. So Slack Huddle is supposed to imitate the physical office. So what happens in a physical office? If I am sitting on a chair and there is someone else sitting beside me, I don't schedule a meeting to talk to my neighbor, right? So I tap the neighbor on the shoulder. We have a 5-minute chat. Be done with our discussion. Go back to our work. The Slack Huddle is meant to simulate exactly that. So if you see someone who's live on Slack, you immediately start a huddle, and it's just like having a conversation. So you can invite one or more people into that huddle. You can even share a screen if you want, if you're wanting to show what work you're doing, and if the meeting is related to the work that you're doing. And that's it. I mean, you don't schedule a meeting, you don't schedule a Zoom meeting or whatever else, and make it formal. This is just informal collaboration at the workplace that is enabled by a technology like Slack. And the huddle is one of the recent innovations that we have introduced. And we are seeing a lot of interest both from tech companies and others, whether it's banks or others, to use these features.
okay, a couple of things I would like to understand here. When you are talking about this environment in organizations, many of the organizations, especially, belong to sectors which are highly regulated,
Right.
and there are certain compliances which are even applicable for their mode of functioning or working. So when the here the sort of there is a what I can say, a fundamental change in the dynamics of working.
Hmm.
So and how do you ensure that then they are compliant with those whatever the regulatory requirements are there? That is one part. And the other thing I would like to understand is, again, an enterprise was working with lot of integration of lot of enterprise applications
Correct.
which were performing different functions. Again,
Correct.
when we are talking about collaboration thing like in this way, how does that seamless integration with those existing enterprise applications take place?
Okay. So let me take your first question, which is really about regulated industries. So absolutely, I mean, and we work with a number of regulated industries, right? Especially in the financial services, whether it is banks or insurance companies, and there are very very clear guidelines, from the government, and sometimes from the industry regulatory body as well. uh, the most important, for a cloud provider like us is really around data residency, and that is something that we took care of about 18 months ago. So that is when the first India data center for Salesforce was set up, and that is in Mumbai. So we have, all the new customers who are, subject to these regulatory requirements, data residency, we now host them on the India data center. Many others who are initially being hosted outside India, we have gradually migrated a vast majority of them to the India center, and that will keep expanding. And Salesforce globally is committed to complying with all local regulations, and that is why we launched this concept called the Hyperforce, which is a series of localized data centers, which we have set up now in multiple countries, and India was one of the first countries where this was set up, right? Uh, we are also keeping a close eye on the, data privacy and data protection bill that is currently being debated in Parliament, and of course, we will comply with whatever regulations come up. And I mean, we've not had any challenges, now with all the financial services customers that we are working with. So that is one part of it. The second part, you raised a very valid point about multiple enterprise applications. In fact, Salesforce research shows that most large enterprises globally use up to 900 applications internally, right, for a variety of reasons. So integration, getting them to work together, is a perennial challenge, right? Now, from a Salesforce perspective, there are really two solutions that we provide for this. One is, of course, MuleSoft, which is top rated enterprise middleware and integration bus, that is part of Salesforce, and we offer MuleSoft as a way to connect all the applications together. And this is then not really a point to point integration. It is using the concept of the enterprise bus. The other part, which is relevant to the employee experience, is as I said earlier, where Slack becomes important. So as I said, Slack, our vision is to make Slack the single point window for everything that a person needs to do in a day's work, right? And Slack has a number of inbuilt connectors to, the well known and the popular applications, but you can also build connectors to any others that you may want to integrate, and then Slack kind of becomes your single window to accomplish everything that you need to do for your work. So that's the Slack first vision that Salesforce has, and which we are constantly enhancing and working upon.
I'd also like to understand what is the sort of the go-to-market engine that you have for going forward with these solutions.
Can you clarify what you mean by go to market engine?
The GTM strategy that you have
Okay.
when you are approaching the organization's potential customers with this.
Okay. So I mean, our broad go-to-market strategy is, a mix of direct selling as well as going through partners and resellers. Typically, the large enterprise segment, um, those are the ones that we manage directly, and we sell directly to them. But we do have tie-ups with many of the global systems integrators. So if needed, we have the flexibility to also go through them. Um, our overall market is, we divide it into large enterprises, the mid market, and the MSME layer, which is what we call ESMB, right? The emerging and small businesses. And we have a different uh, method of selling to each of these segments. What we need to invest. For example, for the smaller customers, it's most important that they are able to implement the solution in a really quick time. We cannot complicate the implementation. right? So there we work with and they want it at a very uh, aggressive price point. So we need to cultivate the right partner ecosystem which can go and cater to that market, deliver the solutions quick and within the right price point that those customers are looking for. For large enterprises, the approach will be different. So even with Slack or MuleSoft or any of the other things which are now part of the Salesforce family, we follow a similar go to market strategy. We have set up we are actually expanding and setting up a fairly big team around Slack, because we see workplace collaboration and Slack being a very important part of Salesforce's future.
Okay. So, my last question would be then looking forward to the next 3 4 quarters in the workforce collaboration and Slack space. What are going to be your key focus areas?
I mean, if let me answer that slightly differently. I would like to look at maybe three or four things that we believe are going to affect our customers and affect the technology trends in the year. Uh, the first is, I think we have spoken enough about workplace collaboration and what we are doing on that front. So I will come to that later. I think another very very important area that we are investing in is around AI and automation. So it's no longer good enough for customers to have a good sales solution or a service solution or marketing and just react to what customers want from them. You have to be proactive, you have to be able to predict the future, right? And we have more and more AI scenarios embedded into our clouds. So if it's our sales cloud, we have our Einstein AI engine, which actually does lead scoring, opportunity scoring, and really focuses the sales teams on the right opportunities, right? Similarly, when it comes to service, how can we enable more self service? How can we make the chatbots smarter? And how can we provide multiple channels for customers to interact with the companies, and to allow them to do it at any time and from anywhere? So increasingly there will be a lot of AI and automation that is embedded into all our clouds, and that is a very very big area of focus for us. And it again kind of ties back to the remote working we spoke about earlier. So if I am not going to my own office to accomplish my work, I would be reluctant to go to my bank branch or to my insurance company to do the work. I would like to do that also sitting at home, right? And that can only happen only if there is adequate automation built into the solutions through which they interact with their customers. And that automation also becomes more effective if there is AI involved. To give you an example, uh, when Kotak Bank launched 811 5 years ago, you know open a bank account sitting at home, it was such a novel concept, right? Now if you see the way the industry is evolving, that is becoming mainstream. Video KYC is happening, and it's being offered by all the large banks, and that is really being made possible because the AI models are becoming better and better. So only because you have faith in the AI that it can, through the video KYC, actually establish the identity of the customer, are you able to execute on these processes. So I think from Salesforce's side, a massive amount of focus is around AI and automation, and building more and more of that into our clouds. And the other bit which we see as potentially a big area of growth for us is really around sustainability. uh, and I firmly believe that what is important to us in our personal lives pretty soon affects businesses and becomes important for businesses, right? So when the smartphone first came in, that really drove a lot of change in enterprises, because people were then used to doing everything on their phone, having a nice UI, and that affected all the enterprises and the way they were doing their work. Climate change is such a big concern for everyone. Uh, there is soon going to be a lot of pressure on companies to move to a carbon neutral or a net zero mode, right? Salesforce is itself a net zero company, and we are committed to helping our customers move to net zero. And we've recently launched our net zero cloud, which actually helps organizations to measure their carbon emissions, um, analyze them, saying which are the suppliers or which are the parts of the business that are contributing the most, and then actually forecasting the impact on the environment and how we can control it. And this will become very important because things like the ESG index are parameters that everyone is looking at. A customer wants to interact with a company which is environmentally conscious, which is doing something around social change and looking after the community. So I think the role of technology in driving sustainable practices is, to my mind, also going to be another big thing. And we are really looking at our net zero cloud as another avenue to drive our growth, both within India and globally. So those I would say are the big ones: AI and automation, sustainability. Plus, we are increasingly investing in industry specific cloud. So it's no longer enough to just have a sales cloud, because sales works differently for a white goods company versus a bank versus an insurance. And we have, as on date, 12 industry specific clouds, which are actually taking the core product and making them specific to a particular industry. Many of them are being built in India, and that is what we are now selling to our customers. So we are selling a cloud which is specific to, let's say, healthcare and healthcare provider. We have a cloud which is for consumer goods. So I see industry specific clouds also as a big driver of growth for us in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, so in summation, you are primarily focusing on AI and automation, sustainability, the domain-specific clouds, and also on the workplace
And
collaboration.
workplace collaboration, yeah, which and digital HQ. So these are really the big themes for us. And it may interest you that sustainability we have adopted this year as our fifth corporate value. So it's got
Okay.
added to our global core values as our fifth one,
Oh,
uh, just this year. So
great.
that,
Yes.
yeah.
Sustainability is the big focus area, that environmental consciousness. Okay, thanks a lot, Arun. That was very insightful. It was great. Thanks a lot. Have a good
Thank
day.
you. My pleasure.